Hi, thanks for joining us on Girl Above today. We are talking to Elisa Shank. She is the director of the Counseling Center at CCU. And Elisa, tell us a little bit more about you before we dive in.
Yeah. Personally, I've been married for almost 20 years and I have two boys, 13 and 9. And professionally, I have a huge passion for university mental health. I have been working with students on college campuses since 1998 at Biola when I was in grad school. Then I worked at CU Boulder for 10 years in their Wardenberg Student Health Center, Department of Psychological Health and Psychiatry. And now I run the Counseling Center on campus at CCU. So I love university students. I love helping people find freedom in Christ and improving their overall mental health.
Awesome, thank you. So that's what we're going to talk about today is even though the world is on lockdown and you have your kids at home and they might not be in college yet, that process of preparing them and preparing yourself as a parent doesn't stop. So we are going to pick Elisa's brain about two main things. How can parents kind of emotionally prepare themselves for this transition? But then also, what is she seeing in college kids today? And because she's been, at a Christian university, at non-Christian universities, you've probably seen all of the things.
All the things. Yes.
So yes, she can give us all the tips. So we're going to start with kind of laying a groundwork of why is it so hard for parents to send their kids off to school. It's such a huge change, but it requires parents to have some behavioral changes as well. Let's
Totally.
just start there.
Yes. So one of the things that we see is, and every parent and child has a different relationship. And I'm seeing this as my kids are moving into some of those teen years. There are some kiddos who stay close and attached and tell you everything. And there are some kiddos that stopped talking to you 5 years ago. So every parent is going to be coming from this towards this in a different way with different kids and with your own personality and your own story. But what we want for people is to be as healthy as possible and help their students launch effectively. So a piece of that has to do with not over functioning on behalf of your child. So we have some moms that call their students every day to wake them up for class. And to me, that is an over functioning process, right? Like by the time your student is in college, they should be able to reliably set an alarm, get out of bed, and show up to class on time, right? Now it's different right now because we're all just in class at home. But come fall, hopefully, if we're all opened back up, thinking about how you can prepare your child to be the successful, functioning adult that you want them to be, and not sort of over functioning is really my word for that.
Yep. And that I can imagine is a huge transition
It
for
is.
people. And they're not in your house. So
Mhm.
that right there is a change.
Yes,
So
because you can feel anxious, right? Oh no, what if my child doesn't wake up for class today? Oh no, what if they miss a deadline, right? But that's something that there are different phases in parenting, and we want to shift our kids and ourselves through those phases so that by the time they're a sophomore, a junior, a senior, they are building the mastery that they can do it, right? If we sort of helicopter parent, if we hover, there's new names for those things now, but if we're too if we're over involved and we're over functioning and we are taking the responsibility instead of helping our kids move into their own responsible adult self, then in some ways we're handicapping them instead of helping them.
yes, which is a great segue um, to talk about the 4 stages of parenting. How do
Yes,
we get to that place where we can do a nice handoff and feel
yes.
good about where they'll end up?
Totally. So these 4 stages I'm pulling from Bob Hostetler, who posted them on a Focus on the Family website. And, the initial stage is commander, right? So first, the initial stage is just love and hug and care for and change diapers and feed, right? But as we move into those early years of crawling and walking and our little munchkins asserting their will, right? They get that I don't wanna, like they get that little sass and they have a really strong no really early. So the parent has to function as a commander in that space, right? We have to tell them what to do, what we expect of them. We have to help them with what is expected and what is normal, and how to engage. And then we move to the coaching phase where we're helping them, but we're not commanding, right? It's less militaristic and more side by side. And we're helping them begin to take some agency. And this is still early, right? Then we move into the next phase, let's see here, which is a counselor. And then our students, our children are coming to us for advice, for connection, for decision making and discernment. But the final phase, which is the hardest one, is consultant. And the hardest part about shifting from counselor to consultant is that you have to hold your tongue. You have to wait for them to ask for your advice, for your input, for those things. And this is a big shift, right? When students are at home and they're in high school, you've got a curfew, you've got expectations, they're telling you where they're going, what they're up to, those kinds of things. But when you move into this consultant role, you have to wait. And that is so hard, right? Because you also know that your child's brain is only 17 or 18 or 19 years old. So we also know that the frontal cortex, the full frontal lobes, are not developed until like the mid 20s. So you still are pulled. You want to be in that counselor space. You want to maintain some of those elements of coaching, but we have to shift to an adult to adult space, where it's not adult to child anymore. We're moving that child up into an adult to adult way of connecting. And that is really hard. And as someone who's worked in university mental health for a long time, every spring when our students are potentially going home for summer, I talk to them about, you've just had these 2 semesters of independence and freedom and not checking in, and you're about to go home. And when you go home, mom and dad may expect you to abide by curfew and tell them where you're going and those kinds of things, which are totally okay and are respectful, but we still have to recognize that you've just been a semi-adult for the last 2 semesters, and now you're heading home. It needs to shift a little bit. And moms and dads, listen to this, because it's hard, right? When they come back under your roof for these breaks, for this quarantine, all of this, it's hard not to fall back into that high school parent space. And we've got to help you move forward into that adult to adult consultant role.
Yes. So that consultant, would you say that role starts when they leave for college?
I think essentially because that is one of their first forays into independence and moving towards adulthood.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you for that explanation. So what does it look like you said this the other day when we were preparing, prepare the child for the road and not the road for the child?
Yes. So Carrie Kubizin-Kampakis, if I'm saying that correctly, has a phenomenal blog. And literally she wrote an article titled Prepare the Child for the Road and Not the Road for the Child. And part of what we're hearing these days, that one of the new terms is snowplow parenting. So the idea is that you're going out and you're literally pulling all the obstacles out of the way so that your child has a clear path. Now that seems like a good idea in theory, but in fact, it's problematic. And part of what she talks about is our children need to experience little league stress, like literally baseball, little league stress, before they move into big league stress. And I can tell you, after having spent nearly my entire career in university mental health, that I've had clients come into my office and sit down and say, I don't know how to cope at all. And I say, tell me about this. What does this mean for you? And part of what they're saying is that when the road has been cleared for them and they haven't had to cope with disappointment and they haven't had to, be not chosen for the team or struck out or those kinds of things, they don't build those experiences of overcoming. They don't learn how to cope with hard times if they've never had to cope with hard times. So it's really important to help them cope with the little things along the way while you're right there, right? You've got your arms, you're right there, you're available. You can support them in coping with hard times, overcoming those hard times, turning them to the Lord, turning them to their faith, being that really safe space, instead of being the snowplow parent where they don't have any hard experiences. It's important. It's actually important for our children to walk through hard experiences. I can speak to this from my firstborn. There was an experience that he had where there was some bullying in a new school. And that was really hard. I actually pulled him out of that school at semester and homeschooled for a semester, which apparently we're all doing right now again. But as we think about that, and he reflects on it now several years down the line, he says, Mom, I learned so much. That was really hard. I really struggled, but I learned about myself. I learned about the way that I was interacting with other people that might have been hard for them, so that I won't do that in the future. And so he's really able to look back. I would have shielded him from that if I could, right? I absolutely would have, but he needed to go through that in order to grow and build a sense of mastery and efficacy. So I'm not recommending putting your children in situations where they're bullied, but we do have to let them go through hard things so that they can build that sense that they can do it. They can build a sense that they have the capacity and the skills to overcome hard seasons, because I'd rather have it be failing a paper in 8th grade than getting fired from a job as an adult.
Right. And them failing that paper in 8th grade actually equips them for experiences that they have in adulthood, even though it's painful to get through that 8th grade moment.
Absolutely.
So what are some ways that parents can, in their own mental health and their own lives, what are some things that equip parents to be able to
Yes.
kind of sit back and observe things rather than feel like they have to
Right.
get in there and plow?
Totally. So I think for parents, I mean, the first act of parenting, right? Birthing a child is your first lesson that you are not in control, right? It doesn't go how you thought. It doesn't go on schedule as you anticipated, right? So from the beginning, there are little lessons that God gives us that we are not in control. And so I think as a mom, we have to daily lay down our desire to plow the road for our kids, our desire to prevent them from harm and struggle and fear and pain, and know that we have a big God that is allowing some of these things in their lives so that they can grow and learn how to lean into Him and learn how to find their own faith that is authentic to them. One of the things that we see is that there are students who, grow up in Christian homes and then go to college. And once they're in college, they can walk away from their faith. And for me, that means that they didn't get an authentic connection with God and an awareness that there's nothing that we can do to contribute to our own salvation, and an awareness of the miracle that we just experienced at Easter. And so I think, we want our kids they have to stumble and fall a little bit. We have to hug and kiss and patch up those scraped knees. But as parents, we also have to separate our identity from the identities of our children, right? My success and failure as a human being is not tied to the success and failure of my kids. Do I want them to succeed? Yes. Do I want them to be healthy, effective, relational, amazing husbands and fathers one day, if that's what God has for them? Yes. But I have to separate some of my expectations and let them grow into the person that God has created them to be. And that requires me sometimes doing my own work and going into therapy. That might require some family therapy. There's just different ways of getting some support.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that, because that's something as a high school teacher that I was noticing a lot, is the line between like where parent ends and child begins is really intertwined.
It can be. Yes.
Yeah. And the mental health of a parent is so important to the health of a child.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And there's no shame in getting help, right? I have my own therapist. I have my own spiritual director. I have a team of people that support me so that I can be the best psychologist, the best mom, the best wife, or really sometimes just good enough, right? We don't have to be the best and we don't have to be perfect, but I operate from an object relations theoretical orientation, and one of our theorists talks about the good enough mother. And that's actually the best mother you have, is the good enough mother, because she met the needs, she met the threshold, she provided the care, the concern, etc. But it wasn't that demand for perfect children. It wasn't, you must look perfect all the time. That's sometimes what I see in therapy for these sweet little college students, is that they came from homes where they had to appear perfect. And yet what was happening at home was not perfect. So that gets really complicated. If you are literally screaming and yelling at your children every Sunday morning on the way to church, and then you show up at church and everything looks great, then we're in trouble. And the message that we're sending is not a healthy message.
So that's a great way to transition into talking a little bit about just culture,
Yes.
like the culture of college students right now. What are some of the biggest issues that you see college students struggling with in your office?
Yeah, so unfortunately, a lot of what we see college students struggling with has to do with traumatic experiences that they've had in their lives, whether those were boundary crossings that were inappropriate, or abuse, or sexual assault. It's really actually sad and scary what our students are struggling with. There's also a lot of depression and anxiety and eating disorders and the panic attacks, those kinds of things. I think one of my messages to moms and dads is to help your child get the help that they need. One of the things that I really struggle with is that we have students whose parents maybe are ignoring their depression or telling them to just pray more. And as a Christian psychologist who was trained at Baylor and at Biola, there's nothing about antidepressants and anti-anxiety medications that suggest that you're not engaging with your faith. When we have people who have diabetes, we don't tell them to just pray and not take their insulin. So when we have people with panic attacks and depression, it doesn't make sense to me that we tell people to just pray and assume that some of that biochemistry is just going to remit. So that's something that sometimes we have students that are coming in saying, can you please help me figure out how to get the medication that I need? Because that wasn't available to me when I was at home because of my parents' ideas about mental health and faith. And I am a Christian and I am a mental health professional, and I've been doing this literally since 1997 when I sat with my first client. And yes, I mean, not everyone needs medication, but there definitely are people who do. And so if your child, if yourself, if you guys are struggling, then giving yourself permission to go meet with a medical professional, a psychiatrist, a therapist, and think about what are the appropriate next steps. So, and this isn't, it's not a huge percentage of our campus population, but it's a big issue when they feel like they can't get the help and support they need because there are Christian messages about faith and mental health that run counter. Our God literally says that he wants us to live full, vibrant lives, right? He has given us life and given it abundantly. And yet depression and anxiety and panic attacks and trauma strip some of that abundance. So what we want is for people to be able to reconnect with the abundant life that God has created for them. And if that means they need some support, then they need some support.
Yeah. What would be a message to parents if you look at, there's a wide array of issues that you guys are seeing, but, just a few little tips that parents could do to prepare their students emotionally to have the resilience to enter college?
Yes. I would say read Cloud and Townsend's books on boundaries, right? So read the boundaries books, read the boundaries with kids, boundaries with teens, boundaries in your marriage, all of them. Just read anything Cloud and Townsend have written. But it is like part of what they're fabulous. And they graduated years before me from the same graduate program. Part of what we see, we see relationship conflicts, we see boyfriend-girlfriend conflicts, we see identity issues, but figuring out how to help your child ask for things and say no to things appropriately, right? That is a boundary. And how to communicate instead of being passive aggressive or relying on the phone to, text your roommate, hey, could you stop doing this, that, or the other? It's really important that our kids have the skills to navigate conflict. So teach them how to successfully walk out conflicts, because the truth is we are all just a little bit selfish, right? So we are selfish human beings, and we want things the way that we want them. And at CCU in particular, we have this fabulous but not fabulous setup where they have suites for everybody. So you have your direct roommate, but then you have like other pairs of direct roommates, and you all share the common area in the kitchenette. which is lovely because you're not in like a dining room, a dorm room the size of my current dining room that I'm sitting in, which is what I experienced at Baylor. But it's also hard because now you have sometimes 6, sometimes 8 different personalities and 8 different attitudes about cleanliness and about picking up after yourself and those kinds of things. So communication skills, conflict resolution skills, dealing with disappointment is really important because I always say this, and this was my experience in college too, that if these are little people, right, we have this person likes this person, but they like that person who likes that person, right? So you end up in this giant circle of I like this person and this person likes that person, and it can be disappointing and it can be a struggle when our young students, they think I'm going to college and I'm going to find my life partner and whatnot. And I would also give them permission to please recognize that you don't have to find your husband or wife in college.
Yes, that's a huge point. That is a big deal.
And especially at Christian schools, there's all this pressure to, are you my husband? Are you my wife? What is this going to be okay? Are you, blah, blah, blah. And I think waiting on God and stopping and saying, I'm going to be okay. And a season of singleness could actually be really helpful for me to figure out who I am and what gifts God has given me and how he's preparing me for the life that he wants me to lead. One of my staff members this year was a longtime missionary in Europe and just got married at 44. Mm-hmm. And it's a different season, right? God has a different plan for each of us. But I think helping our students relax a little bit about that. They have a statement on campus, Ring by Spring, and I just want to delete it from everybody's mind because not everyone is ready to meet their partner. God sometimes has different plans for people. So that's one aspect of Christian culture on college campuses that I struggle with because I think it's so important for God to develop you into who you need to be first, and you to get the help and the healing and the wholeness first, and then think, look and see, oh, who's walking alongside me? Let's go in that direction together.
That is, yes, everything to that was exactly the thoughts that, I know a lot of CCU students and, non-Christian college students, and that is, it touches on the desire for them to be loved and chosen and known and know that their life is going to be okay, that they're not going to just end up lonely. But yeah, there's some steps that might need to happen before that.
Absolutely.
So let's kind of wrap this up with how can parents do a good send-off, a healthy goodbye to their kids?
Yes.
Well, the door is still open at home, but absolutely. Goodbye.
Yes, this is so hard. It is literally, I watched my sister go through this fall as her first son went to college, and my sister-in-law has done it twice. So I've been watching this in my family, and it is hard. And a piece of that is that we want to give our children both roots and wings, right? So like you said, the door is open, home is available to you, but we have to let them fly. We would never choose consciously to clip their wings and prevent them from flying. But there are some things that we do that might contribute to that. So what we want to do for a good goodbye and a good send-off is have some sort of a ritual, right? This is so hard right now because graduations are canceled, proms canceled, parties in your home to celebrate your grad can't be offered right now. So this is a whole different, this spring of 2020 is also extra hard. And I just saw a blog the other day that was saying, actually on your website, it was saying, parents, it's okay to grieve this, right? It's okay to grieve this because it is grief worthy. And we do not do well in our culture. We don't do goodbyes particularly well. We don't do grief particularly well. So thinking about what does it mean to communicate that presence, to communicate we love you, we will be there for you, we're going to work together to move into this adult to adult stage, which is so hard, right? Because we're older, obviously, than our children. So we know that their brains are not yet developed and they are not ready for this adulthood thing. But we have to help launch them and move them towards that. So sitting down, having a conversation around, hey, I'm human, I'm your parent, I love you, but I screw up all the time, and that's okay, and I hope you have grace for me. But talking about how can we navigate this and what is going to work for us, right? So does it work for us to talk on the phone once a week? Does it work for us to text every few days? Like, what is going to be a good sort of pattern of connection and communication that's going to be workable? And then thinking about how to create a ritual for a goodbye. Not everyone has the luxury of even driving their kids to campus and getting them settled where they need to be. And so I think recognizing that it's going to look different for everyone, but to be communicating and intentional is really important.
Yeah, I love all of that. Okay, any final thoughts, things we didn't get to talk about that you think are really important?
I think, I guess one other thing that I would cover is just listen, right? Your child is the expert on them. Even though you've watched them from, the whole time grow into this person, let them be their own expert, right? Help them think through, right? One of the things I sometimes do with my family is I sit down and we talk about sort of a life balance wheel. So there's physical health and emotional health and relational health and financial health and those kinds of things. And we literally talk about how do we find health and balance in a culture that pulls for this every second of every day, right? We can all just disappear and become disconnected, but reminding them that even God is in relationship, right? The Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit are in community. And when God said, let us make man in our image, it was a relational image. And if our only relationships are connecting via text or those kinds of things, it's not the same. And so thinking about how do we talk, how do we connect, how do we make space for some of those soul moments that are harder to come by as our teens are moving through that what we call separation and individuation. They have to, it's important, but it's hard, right? And it's hard to watch that. Daniel Siegel is a psychiatrist and author. He wrote The Whole Brain Child and a bunch of fabulous other things. But years ago, I watched a piece of one of his talks where he talked about our teens have to go through this stage, right? Otherwise, I can't speak for you, but I can speak for me, right? He talked about when you're in a healthy, safe home and your mom is making lunch and reading bedtime stories and caring for you, like I would sign up for that right now, right? And so, but it's important, right? We have to go through that separation and individuation stage in order to move into adulthood, because I'm 45 and my mom should not be making me lunch and tucking me in at bed, right? And reading me stories. So we have to move through these stages in order to be healthy, balanced human beings. And they're hard because it's stretching and growing and shifting and moving, but there is goodness on the other side.
I love it. That was so great. Thank you so much. So, how can people get in touch with you if they need?
Yeah, so I work on campus at Colorado Christian University. My email is ashanks, SHANKS, at ccu.edu. And in that capacity, we serve on campus college of undergraduate students. There's two different processes here. I know you know that. We serve the on-campus students who are undergrads at CCU. But I am connected. I have a great referral list of outstanding Christian practitioners in the Denver metro area. We're always happy to help people find the support and the help that they need.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. So,
Absolutely.
Elisa, I have just appreciated getting to know you and learning about all your passions. You also touch on eating disorders, which I
Yes.
think we'll have to do another chat about that. Totally different topic.
We'll meet back for that one.
Your wisdom, we will be back with that one.
Awesome.
And if you are someone watching this, just add a comment below if you have more questions and we can address those.
Happy to support everyone.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thanks, Krista. Bye.